Nebraska on Tap, the source for everything educational and informational about groundwater in agriculture. If you are an ag producer or a citizen of Nebraska, this show is made for you by the Middle Republican Natural Resource District.
Now it's time for our weekly show, hosted by Heather Disming.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Nebraska on Tap. So this week we are talking to Ted Tietjen. So Ted is kind of a legend in this area because he has been involved with so many projects involving water, land, weeds. I mean, currently he's on the weed board still, and he's very passionate about it. And he's also been heavily involved in the research center up in North Platte from the UNL TAPS. And, you know, he is just really, really, really influential when it comes to water conservation and water management. He's really big into that. And he said in a lot of his stuff that the benefit between exchanging information with growers and researchers benefits both sides, because then everybody knows where they're landing. So we're going to get into an interview that I did with Ted about some of the Republican River Compact things that he had wrote on. And then also he is very passionate about weed mitigation and invasive plants as well. So we sit down and talk to him about a few of those things. So stay tuned, and we will get into that interview right now.
Okay, my name is Ted Tietjen. I live in Grant, Nebraska.
Tell me a little bit about what kind of boards you're on right now.
Okay, I currently serve on the Southwest Weed Management Board, which was organized in 2018. Prior to that time, they were associated with the Southwest RC&D, and because they stopped getting federal funding, why it was probably important to convert it. The Southwest RC or Weed Management to a 501c3.
All right. And so, Ted, I had just talked to you a little bit about an article that I found that you wrote, Why Watershed Management. And so I just wanted to ask you a few questions. You had mentioned here the tragedy of commons, where water demands exceed what's available, and to comply with the Republican River Compact. Can you tell me a little bit about what you meant?
Okay. What the tragedy of the commons, again, it's when you have demand exceeding availability. And certainly the Republican River Compact would fall in that category. Well, the compact itself is, each state is required to be responsible for whatever agreements they have. And that's one of the things that the U.S. Constitution has. And so if any state makes an agreement with another state, they have an obligation to fulfill it regardless what happens in the future. And that would be the case with Kansas and Nebraska and Colorado. And of course, Nebraska and Kansas and Colorado lost in the lawsuit. So, and that's pretty evident of how that works. So we had to make adjustments in how we provide the necessary water to meet our shortages. And Colorado has some major issues, as does Nebraska. So we have what we call the Rock Creek project and the Encore project that are used to supply supplemental water when there isn't enough available in the Harlan County Reservoir. And Kansas gets to store their water needs in the Harlan County Reservoir. And so if the reservoir is a certain level, we don't have to pump any water. If it's below a certain level, they have to start providing additional water to meet those needs.
Yeah, and I see in the litigation settlement. Colorado got 11% of allocation, Nebraska got 49%, and Kansas got 40%. And that's from an article in June 2003.
Okay.
And then I see that you talk about the summer fallow and ways to help with management of soil moisture in this article that you had written as well. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, up till the late 1950s, it was common in western Nebraska, which is where I was writing most of this material, was 50% summer fallow and then planted wheat. Well, summer fallow certainly does preserve moisture, but it also evaporates a vast amount. And consequently, and if there's rainfall or wind, there's possibility for erosion from either one of those. And so when the dams were built, that data was used rather than what is currently available, where we have residue management on farms. There's some cultural practices that have changed significantly, and we have a number of people using where we built these terraces and so forth.
To stop the runoff.
Yeah, and that's been significant, and so that's changed everything. Consequently, the dams themselves, generally in the upper reaches of the Republican River Basin, have less water in than what they originally were designed for.
Yeah, because you don't have that runoff anymore, right? Because it just absorbs into the field.
And the other thing is it reduces the runoff in the stream. And that's where the weed management groups come in, because their primary objective is to take out undesirable vegetation out of the floodplain of the Republican River Basin and its tributaries. And those included are Russian olive, salt cedar, and Phragmites. Those are the main ones, and then red cedar. Now, Russian olives are kind of difficult to control because once you cut it, you have to treat the stump or else it'll regrow again. Whereas Phragmites can be sprayed with typical chemicals that will just totally destroy the vegetation. But unfortunately, Phragmites have a real unique value, and that is they are, during the growing season, are able to send out a runner every foot every day. So consequently, if you have a Phragmites close to the stream, it's not unusual for them to totally choke off a stream flow.
Yeah, especially if they're growing that fast.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And of course, red cedar, all you have to do is cut it off, and that's the end of it. But they all take water, and they're not contributing any economic value. And so Southwest Weed Management and other weed management districts are making a major effort to control those. Well, our funding then comes from both the Nebraska Department of Agriculture and also from the Nebraska Environmental Trust. And their requirements are currently to stay within the floodplain and the tributaries. Now, when it comes to red cedar, we'd like to see a statewide program for what we call early detection and eradication, and that would include the upland, because red cedar is becoming a major challenge clear across the state.
Wow. Yeah, and it's great to know about that, because if you don't, then you just see them growing and you don't know that they needed to be eradicated. So,
see, when they first start, by the time they're about 8 years old, they start to dropping seed, at least the female plants. Well, then those start to growing, and in about 20 years, a pasture or a gully or whatever will be totally inundated by the red cedar, and the economic value for pasture is very limited. Now, the Platte River system certainly has as big a problem as any, and that includes the Phragmite problem. That all you have to do is drive along the roads, and you can see that the impact of those plants on the river system.
And when they are so close to the river, what is your best practice for eradicating those, since they're next to a waterway?
Well, there are limitations because you're dealing with waterfowl, and you're also dealing with aquatic fish and so forth that the Environmental Trust and also the Nature Conservancy and other advocacy groups really want to protect.
Right.
So there's a fairly tight schedule that you have to follow in order to eradicate them. Currently, we use airplanes, and and the movement is towards using more drones.
Yeah,
because they will be very precise in their application of herbicides and so forth to control. And also, the drones are used to inspect the areas that have been treated or non-treated to see what needs to be done, and it can be used for mapping.
Yeah, no, those drones are really nice for that because of the precision that they offer and the location tightness that they can offer too, especially if a plane or a person can't get into that area. So that's really nice.
Okay.
And then one of my last questions for you in here, in your article, you had talked about irrigated corn acres started to happen in the 1950s and changed wheat growers into corn growers. And then, the bushel acre for corn at that time was 75 to 80 bushels an acre. And then after center pivots in the 70s, it was an average of 120 bushel an acre. And then by 2016, it was 211 average bushel an acre. But in the 1970s, moratorium on drilling irrigation wells was implemented. And then plus Nebraska had established those NRDs for the water basin sheds. Can you tell me a little bit about your role in some of that?
Right now, I'm involved in a study that deals with evapotranspiration and both using what we call ETC, which is based on sunlight measurement, and then we have the normal ETR, which is relative evaporation, and that's where you use the open pan concept, and then you just put water in the pan, and then on a daily basis you go to work and measure, see how much water is evaporated, and that's what we've been using. And that concept works pretty good where you have irrigation and you don't have any drought stress. But when you start using ETC, which is used on sunlight basis, which shines on the ground, and either the soil warms up, it bounces back into the atmosphere with residue, or if there's no water to evaporate, why the ETC reading is extremely low. And if we're going to do water management on a watershed basis in the future, we need to have that number because a lot of the acres are dry land. So one of the benefits of ETC are that it'll identify early moisture stress in a field. Now, you could do it for either irrigation or dry land, or native grass, or whatever. And once that information meets research standards, it will be used in satellite imagery, whereas when the satellite comes over, it'll be able to tell you exactly how much water was consumed on a given day over a certain area. having that information, you can take and put advisory boards together to manage watersheds for long-term sustainability. And that's the major goal that we're at this point. We've come a long ways in the last 10 years. It's just amazing.
Our district specifically has been investing a lot in water management. When it comes to that, we had just got a contract with Micrometer, and we're finishing up all of our district's meters with the brand new telemetry meters, which everybody seems to like a little bit better. They're more accurate, and they're really specific and real time too, which is nice.
That concept is very beneficial to the management of the organization. One of the things I want to compliment the Middle Republican NRD about is the water study that they did a couple years ago on the Red Willow. And believe me, I learned a lot from that report, and they've done an outstanding job of identifying the sources of water that are available to the Red Willow. Mm-hmm. And now we need to start doing a little more with the electronic meters and using ETC to help in determining how we can best manage our water in the future. That's the next step here.
Yeah, exactly. Because, once it's gone, we never know when it's really going to come back. It's Mother Nature's call on that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And there's no question that we can't do a better job of managing our water resources than what we currently are.
Right. It just takes a little effort sometimes.
Well, it's a learning process. Mm-hmm. There's always a resistance to change.
There definitely can be resistance to change. That is definitely a fact.
Yeah, that's normal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yep. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Ted, for your time today, and I look forward to talking to you with you in the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you again.
All right. So thank you so much for listening to my interview with Ted. He is such a history book. I mean, he's literally been around since the NRD started, and he's clearly very passionate about it every step of the way. So thank you again for tuning in this week. We will see you again next week, and have a great one. Bye-bye.